the short-term price action dominates crypto narratives. Because people are so fixated on prices, they lose the sight of the long-term implications and trends.
I think the nature of crypto is a very short attention span.
The current public key crypto system to like post-quantum one, most likely there will be a lot of vulnerabilities during this transition period.
This material is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide accounting, legal, or tax advice, or investment recommendations, or an official statement of Presto or its affiliates.
Welcome to the Presto Research Podcast. My name is Rick, and I'm joined by my co-host and boss, Head of Research, Peter.
Hello.
We recently published 2 pieces on quantum computing, and we did so with the help of an expert, quantum computing researcher and assistant professor of computer science at UC Davis, Isaac Kim. So the 2 pieces were Quantum Computing in Crypto, Everything You Need to Know, and a quantum computing expert answers all your crypto questions. These cover really interesting topics in the intersection of the 2 fields, so we really encourage everyone to read these. But for today's podcast, we're pleased to have Professor Kim as a special guest. Welcome, Professor Kim.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so to start off, could you please briefly tell us about yourself?
Right. So, as Rick said, I'm an assistant professor of computer science at UC Davis, and my primary research field is quantum computing. So I went to grad school in 2007 or 8-ish for quantum computing and finished my PhD in 2013. And back then it was a very different time. So this was when like the number of people working on quantum computing was very, very small. So pretty much everybody knew each other. And frankly, there weren't too many jobs for people in quantum computing. So I was in both academia and also in industry. For the industry jobs, I was at like IBM at around like 2016. This was when they started putting out these like very small scale quantum computers for people to use, like, nothing too serious, but just for fun. And I saw that growing quite rapidly since then. And I was also at a startup called PsiQuantum. This was in 2020-ish. But after that, in between that, I was also in academia. But afterwards, I was just staying in academia for the most part.
Okay, cool. At a time when it wasn't so popular yet, and it wasn't a hot topic like it is today, what got you interested in quantum computing?
So back then, there weren't too many schools that in which you could do like quantum computing research, and I just so my main background was physics and math actually, because I wasn't in engineering. Like I was more interested in stuff that are long term, but that looks kind of interesting. So from that perspective, quantum computing seemed pretty interesting because it can do something useful in the long term, but it also looks pretty fundamental because it seems like a totally different technology. So I thought I would just, have a more or less academic life for like many decades, just doing some research. And I honestly didn't expect things to change so rapidly since the mid 2010s. That was a big surprise.
So you said it's interesting that you mentioned that when you started out, like everybody knew each other. That's how small the community was. Yeah. And how big would you say the community is now?
Right. So like a good way to think about this is that there's like a one big conference in quantum computing called Quantum Information Processing. It's actually much broader. Quantum is not just quantum computing, but there are other more less applied fields. But this is the primary venue that people go to. And I think when I was in grad school, there were, I could be wrong about this, but I think there were roughly like 200-ish people, like between like 150, 200 people at the conference. These days, it's more like there are like 1,000 people. So that's a big change. And there are also more specialized conferences. Like, for example, there's a conference called QEC. It's acronym for Quantum Error Correction. That is much more specialized and much more geared towards quantum computing. And when I was in grad school, I think there were like 30 people in QEC conference. Now there are like few hundred people in QEC conference.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still very small. It says 1,000. That's still incredibly
Yeah,
small.
it is still very small. Like if you compare it to like the ML and things like that, yeah, it's still very, very small. But the thing is, we just don't have enough grad school around the world to like train these people. So there's a limit on how fast this thing can go, actually.
Yeah, some similarities probably with crypto, because there are some famous photos of Bitcoin conferences in the early 2010s, like maybe 2012 or something, and there are like 6 or 7 people in a 100-person room, who've just showed off. And then today, you can have conferences with a few thousand tickets sold, and on pre-sale. Then on the next question, as an expert on quantum computing, but not necessarily crypto, I assume there are many things that surprised you when we did our research for the report. What were some of the things that surprised you most about crypto?
Right. I guess, yeah. So yeah, as you said, I really don't know much about crypto. So I was very naive and I was thinking that like even if quantum computers come, I was thinking, oh, like you can just use new cryptographic schemes that are resilient against quantum attacks, and so like why should I worry about that? So that was my naive thought, but then I realized after talking to Rick and other people how difficult it would be to actually implement those changes. Yet this somehow, I wasn't aware of this like more practical issues. So that was like a big surprise to me. And so on that ground, I was somewhat surprised that people are like not taking quantum attacks very seriously. Of course, some people take it seriously and some people don't. But it seems like such a small investment to be like sure about your asset in the future. And I'm just a little surprised why some people to say ignore this. That was the most surprising part to me.
I think the academia side in crypto generally lags other industries. And that's a big reason also. I'm sure there are the number of people, the percentage of people who understand the risks are very low to start with. And then there are also constant like big risks to crypto. And I think after a few years, we all kind of get immune or jaded to these headlines and we kind of dismiss them as things that come and go.
I see.
Which some things that do not go, they come and they stay and they turn into bigger risks. So yeah, I was also surprised when you were telling me, or as we were writing it, how not imminent, but real the risks on the horizon.
Right. Like just out of my curiosity, when these like big risk events happened in crypto, like did people just solve it like pretty much right away? I mean, like when it became imminent, did people manage to solve it, or is it not like that?
The risks I think of the most are things to do with like stable coins and depegging, or like an exchange maybe not having enough assets and stuff. But I think the nature of crypto is a very short attention span. So if there's a headline or some exciting news that gets more looks and attention than that risk, that risk kind of fades away, and we all kind of forget that everyone was worried at one point that the biggest exchange didn't have enough assets to cover all the customer deposits, and we all kind of forget it. And then Bitcoin rallies 5%, and then we're all happy again. And, so there's a correlation a bit to how everyone's feeling, which is related to the price, and then what other news is out there. And we're very quick to forget.
I see.
Yeah, I think the short-term price action dominates crypto narratives.
I see.
I think oftentimes, because people are so fixated on prices, they lose the sight of the long-term implications and trends. And but I think you are absolutely right that this is when you step back and think about it, the real upside driver for crypto assets and Bitcoin in particular is a result of a long-term trend. So likewise, when we think about the risks, we also should think about in the long run. And I think the quantum issue is a risk that I think when you have a long-term horizon should definitely take into account. And obviously, I didn't know that myself, but like as I was reading the research work that both of you have done, it became very clear to me that it's something that well worth investing your time on learning about, because this will be an issue for in the coming years and become even more relevant as time moves on. So yeah, it's a real educational kind of experience for me as well to read your report and to work with you. And the one thing that I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned in the report that the intermediate scale error corrected quantum computer, or ISEQ, that could be a sort of an important milestone, because depending on
I think so.
Yeah, the arrival of that ISEQ could signal that the quantum threat is actually very imminent.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Maybe introduce or explain the concept of ISEQ.
Yeah. So like one thing I should be clear is that this ISEQ is not like a very standard acronym. So we just thought that this would be like a good model to think about the threat, and some kind of like a simple but easy to remember goalpost for quantum computing. And what we were thinking was a quantum computer that can have roughly 100 logical qubits. So these are qubits that are error corrected, meaning that. So yeah, maybe I should step back and briefly talk about what logical qubit is. So you can store a single bit of information in 0 or 1, right? This is very simple. But if you want to store it for a long time, and if you're not sure if your storage medium is reliable, then what do? You just make multiple copies. So I have like one data here, another data here, another here. And like 20 years later, what do? I just compare the data, and at some locations, like maybe majority of them will say 1, and in some location, majority of them will say 0. So then you can check for errors by saying that, if the majority of them is 1, probably what I recorded was 1 and not 0, and vice versa. So the main lesson here is that using more bits, you can store the information more reliably. So you can do the same thing for qubits, which is the quantum analog of bits. Basically, what we really care about is a quantum computer with logical qubits, meaning that quantum computers whose quantum version of bits are very, very reliable. So this ISEQ is a machine with like a large enough number of logical qubits that can do something interesting. And we think that number is between like 50 to 100 logical qubits that can perform roughly like 1 million operations reliably, something along that line. We're kind of far from that, but like people are making like very rapid progress towards like achieving that goal.
Right. So I mean, and then people are making very rapid progress. Is also helped by the AI as well, or it's something else?
That's let's see. I would say the AI contribution is not 0, but in my mind, it's still like probably definitely less than 10% of this progress.
Right.
Yeah, it's still like a lot of it depends on the like a real experiment and engineering, like actually building something. Yeah. And AI, there's only so much you can help with AI. The key part of work is like actual building.
I think in your report, you mentioned that potentially ISEQ can be achieved in about 5 years. But what are the things that needs to be overcome to get there?
Right. So that's a very good question. So one thing, so this depends on the different technology. So maybe I'll step back and say that there are like many technologies that people are pursuing for quantum computing, like superconducting qubits, ion trap, photon, like silicon qubit, like neutral atom. Like there's really a lot of them. And for superconducting qubits and ion trap qubits, the main issue is the scalability. So for this technology, like in a single quantum processor, like there seems to be a limit on how many qubits you can store inside. So if you want to go build this like big machine, like even if it's like only 100 logical qubit, you will probably need to like link up these different quantum computing modules. And that's a technology that is available, but it's very slow and expensive, and certainly much less reliable than the other parts of the quantum computer. And it is totally not so clear how well this will work, eventually when they need to link this up. So that's the answer. Linking different quantum computing modules, this is the main bottleneck for superconducting qubits and ion traps. For neutral atoms, this is like a rapidly improving new technology. So like if you wind back like 3 years ago, not many people are considering neutral atom as like a strong contender. But very recently, they showed that like even in an academic setting, you can like store like thousands of atoms in a single chip. Admittedly, they didn't do any computation, but the point is that this technology seems like quite scalable up to maybe like tens of thousands of qubits, which is a much larger number than like ion trap or superconducting qubits. So they might be able to actually achieve this like 100 qubit logical machine with like a very low error rate without like linking up different modules. This is a very exciting possibility. But this technology is relatively new, and with engineering, there's always making sure that all the components work perfectly as you expected. It is a difficult thing. So superconducting qubits and ion traps, they have proved that this works. So they have proved every single component of the quantum computer works very well. It's just that scaling them up seems somewhat difficult. Neutral atom, there are many experiments that show like different aspects of what is needed for a quantum computer, but there hasn't been a demonstration of like all those aspects combined together in a single device. So that's it. From the engineering perspective, it doesn't seem like there are any like fundamental difficulties. So this is something to look out for. Yeah, I can't talk about all the companies because that will take like 3 hours or so. But just to complete this, like photon-based companies like PsiQuantum and Xanadu, they are trying to solve the scalability challenge first, and then make their device better. So it's a very potentially risky proposition, because it could be that even if you can scale things up, maybe the device itself is not good. That said, if they can actually build a large-scale scalable device, then there doesn't seem to be any difficulties in principle. But much less has been demonstrated for their technology, so it's really hard to say.
I think this is a topic that's maybe worth monitoring over the years, because there are these companies or research groups that are working to overcome these bottlenecks. And I think in the report, it mentions a few names of companies or research groups that are involved in this, I think. So you think these are the and as an investor in digital assets, if you want to monitor potential risk coming from quantum computing, are these the companies that's worth monitoring? I think that you already mentioned it.
They will be the companies to monitor, and more specifically, usually their progress will be reported in like high-profile journals, like Science or Nature, that kind of things. So they will usually have a title like demonstration of like error corrected quantum computer with some aspects about error correction. And yeah, that's something to keep an eye for.
Right. Actually, maybe I should have asked you this before we started this topic. Was I think maybe some readers needs to understand some basics about physical qubits and then logical qubits as well as error correction, because these are the key drivers in determining when quantum computing actually becomes more viable or not, I guess, right? So can you explain that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah. So the physical qubit is basically any quantum mechanical object that can store a quantum information. So if you think about it, like the bit can be stored in many ways, like in a hard drive or RAM. Like there are like many storage medium. Similarly, quantum information can be also stored in many different medium. So, like for example, in a superconducting qubits, you have some quantum mechanical synthetic system, and if you cool it down, it goes into its ground state. If you put in a little bit of energy, it goes into the first excited state, and those two states define a qubit. Whenever you have two different states, that always allows you to define a qubit. So for atom or ions, they have like many different energy levels. So just by using them, you can get a qubit. That is like a pretty broad definition. But qubits can be unreliable. So to make them reliable, we need to bring them together and somehow bring them into a specific state so that we can check whether some kind of error is happening or not. And this process is called as quantum error correction. Checking whether there are quantum errors or not, and if there is, like correcting them.
I was kind of curious on whether the technology behind quantum computing is something that can easily be kind of copied by the competitor. So let's say one of the players kind of make a breakthrough, then does that mean that particular player will maintain edge for a long time? Similar to, let's say, NVIDIA in AI chips, for instance? Or does that mean that competitors can easily kind of, just come up with the similar setups and then quickly narrow the gap, as we've seen in OpenAI and Grok and in AI algorithms, for instance? Is that right? What's the good way to think about that?
I think it's more like NVIDIA and the other companies because at the end of the day, this is a hardware business. I mean, at least for these quantum computing companies, this is hardware business. And a lot of what they're doing is quite proprietary. Like, it's really hard to know what their like latest research is about. So yeah, I think if you're ahead of other company using a similar technology, I mean, sure, they will eventually catch up because they'll probably also have good people. But yeah, it won't be in like a few months. I think yeah, it'll take some time.
Right. I had a follow-up question to my previous question about what surprised you, and I think what you mentioned also opens up opportunities for crypto and Web3 in general. Are there any specific opportunities that excites you about Web3, like quantum opportunities in particular?
Right. I guess for me, this is probably because I'm geared more towards quantum computing than like crypto. But I'm quite excited about like kind of being like a white hacker for crypto. Because I think this is really an important time to understand exactly what kind of quantum computer is needed to like break crypto, because we don't want to wake up tomorrow just to realize that some secret agency who knows where developed a secret quantum algorithm that only uses like only 1,000 qubit that can break crypto. Like that'll be very disastrous. So these like a very somewhat like tedious but like kind of it's a somewhat tedious but interesting puzzle, like which is to like coming up with like a really optimized quantum computing architecture for like breaking crypto. I think personally that's why I'm excited about. I'm sure there are like that said there are quantum technologies that have cryptographic implications. I know a lot of my colleagues on the more pure computer science side, they've been thinking about foundation cryptography in the quantum world lately. It's a very active and rich topic. And there seems to be many like genuinely new protocols that is only possible using quantum, but impossible classically. These are all a bit far away, but that seems kind of interesting from an outsider point of view too.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of similar to what we were discussing earlier, there's like a lack of sexiness to the threat, because the two things, I guess, that drives funding and research for these things is like how sexy it is and how much attention it's getting, and also can it be monetized. And it seems like we, at least from where I'm sitting, I don't really see many like fundraising news about ways to tackle the threat. And I'm not sure if that's because the threat isn't imminent enough, or it's not sexy enough, or if there's just no clear way to turn this into like a viable way to like monetize the business. So it's hard for people with good ideas to get funding for their research or any business ideas.
That said, I think so. If I were to think more optimistically, I think if we most likely when we transition from the current public key crypto system to like a post quantum one, most likely there will be a lot of vulnerabilities during this transition period, and I think just trying to be a white hacker will like really let you understand much better on these like vulnerabilities before they arise. So I think there might be some opportunities there. So like there are traditional white hackers, and I don't see why that cannot be the case for quantum as well.
Also, Dr. Kim, I wanted to ask you about the paper that came out earlier this week from Google. The Google quantum AI that said that basically that the breaking this RSA encryption may require 20 times fewer quantum resources than previously thought. And I think that maybe caused some alarm bell amongst some people in the crypto, because this may mean that maybe the threat is more imminent than previously thought. What's your take on this particular piece of study?
First of all, it's a good work. So the researcher's name is Craig Gidney. He's made a lot of contributions to these like practical aspects of quantum computation. A lot of his works are very interesting. This one too. That said, there are some caveats. So so this one is for breaking RSA, and the RSA is not being used in crypto, and it's elliptic curve in crypto. The reason why Craig could get improvements is because a couple of things. It's partially on the improvement in the error correction technique and compilation. The other is on like some minor parts about the quantum algorithms, some small parts about it. The part of the algorithm does not really apply to this elliptic curve. Okay, so that's something that I should say. And the part about improved error correction will likely apply to elliptic curve as well, but it's currently not clear what those numbers will lead to. Yeah, so this is a study that needs to be done. Like most likely, like using Craig's technique, one can also improve the resource needed for breaking crypto. But the extent to which you can do this is not so clear. And one thing I should say is this, by the way. So this 20x improvement in Craig's paper is in terms of the number of qubits. So previously, he had a paper about this using roughly 20 million qubits, and now the new version uses 1 million qubit. Okay. However, in the previous version, the computation time was around the order of, I can't remember the exact number, but definitely less than a day. Probably more like 10 hours. Yeah, something along that line. But in the new paper, it's slower. So under the same assumptions, it takes about a week to break something. So, basically 20x reduction in the size of the quantum computer, and let's see, about like 10 times blow up in the computation time. So all things considered, I think like just saying that it's a 20x improvement is it's missing a lot of nuances. But it's a good question. So the thing is, whenever these like new progress is made, you just have to do a lot of extra work to rebuild the old algorithm, like compile down to like gates and all that, and that's just something. There's no automated tool that does this like very nicely. You have to kind of do everything manually. So this is an active area of active research, actually.
Right. So just to kind of sum it up then, although crypto doesn't use RSA, the reason why this study might be relevant is because the techniques that's used to deliver that 20x improvement can also be applied to decrypt the eclipse curve
that's
encryption
right.
method.
Right. Yeah. The difficulty though is that it's not clear like out of the 20x, which is coming from like the pure the part that only applies to RSA, and which part is coming from the part that is more universally applicable. This is hard to know.
Okay, got it. Well, another thing that I wanted to ask you, Dr. Kim, is that in a very kind of ironic way, I feel that the crypto industry is the actually only industry that really talks about this quantum computing issue more vigorously than other industries, because my understanding is that the quantum threat applies to all industries, not just the crypto. Like from traditional banking to military operations to pretty much everything in our lives that requires a cyber protection, right? But yet, I feel that in other industries, I never hear people talk about it as a threat. Like, for instance, if I meet my friends from a banking industry, they don't even know this kind of threat exists out there. And do you think this gap is weird? Do you think, am I right in noticing this difference in attitude? And if this attitude actually are their ignorance justified somewhat because the encryption method used in traditional finance, for instance, is somewhat different from the ones used in blockchain, and therefore maybe is that the reason why they don't talk about it as much as in crypto?
I mean, I don't know much about like finance folks, but I would be surprised if they're not using RSA actually. So like they would be quite vulnerable actually. Yeah, it's a good question. So I do think there is a lot of opportunity for implementing like post-quantum cryptography as a service for this reason, because like if they realize that things are imminent, they're going to have to change something, and they're going to have to pay a lot of money to do that. They're not going to have like internal people to upgrade that. And whenever that happens, like, and if there's a post-quantum cryptography company that can do that for you, like they'll pretty much have no choice but to go to them. So I think that's a big opportunity actually. But I think in many ways, for banking, this can be easier than crypto, because crypto, I mean, well, let's say I'm Jamie Dimon. I mean, like I'm running JP Morgan Chase, and well, I mean, worst comes to worst, you can just like order everyone to update their crypto system, and this is like fully centralized. You can imagine enforcing this, but my understanding is with crypto, this is just not possible. There has to be a consensus. That seems much harder.
I see. Yeah. So it's not so much because of the technology. They use the same RSA or other, same type of encryption to protect themselves. But it's just that when it comes to upgrading it to the quantum safe standards, because the way that one is centralized entity and the other one is a decentralized network. So implementation of the upgrade may be a little bit more complicated for the crypto protocols.
Yeah, that's my impression. Yeah.
When you're in banking, you're surprised at how bad legacy systems still used today are. And it's been like the architecture designed in the 90s or something. So I think a lot of this core stuff does use like RSA and less secure encryption methods. And then mobile banking can use things like ECC and is a bit more secure. So some banking APIs and apps use ECC in the background, and then things like Swift, parts of Swift digital signatures still use RSA. So that's
okay,
pretty So maybe if you're a hacker, you can focus on, or if you're a quantum exploiter, you can focus on banking and not crypto. So our bit,
maybe. Yeah.
Well, there's more money in the traditional finance, right? BNI Mellon custody is like $30 trillion worth of asset. Bitcoin's is only 2 trillion.
Yeah.
So there's more to learn.
I guess so there is a possibility that some of these like dormant like Bitcoin addresses, I mean, there are probably Bitcoin addresses which are, for which like people lost their private key, this period. It's conceivable that if there will be a quantum hacker, they would just target those if the public key is exposed, obviously. Yeah. And nobody can, catch them. Like, what can they do? Yeah, not much. But if it's like traditional finance, then they might get caught, like through,
a bit more serious of a crime.
Yeah.
And then, is that true that the RSA is more easier to crack than elliptic?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. So before Craig's paper, it was elliptic curve was easier to break, but with Craig's paper, RSA is easier to break. But if we use Craig's method to ECC, what's going to happen? We don't know. These things keep changing. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was a great conversation with quantum computing expert, Professor Kim. Thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for your time.
If the viewer wants to learn more on this topic, make sure that you read the great research work done by both Rick and Dr. Kim on quantum computing. Even I was able to understand it. It was written in a very easy to understand language. So, I know the topic kind of scares some people because they immediately think that's very complicated and very difficult. But, somebody like me who's with a non-technical background was able to understand. So I would highly encourage everybody to come visit our website and read the 2 pieces of report. Okay. Well, I guess that's it, everybody. Well, thanks for your time again, Dr. Kim.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, this was fun, actually.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.